more questions.
So as the buyer's solicitor, you received a draft contract from the seller, which will contain the title deeds and a plan of the property. And of course, there's not just one straightforward transaction here. There's freehold and leasehold, and I believe common hold is now making an appearance. Now, if you could just explain to us what freehold, leasehold, common hold means, that would be really useful.
Well, I'll say I don't think at Chapter Law we've come across a common hold yet, so it's probably best to focus on freehold and leasehold. So with a freehold property, you own everything to the centre of the earth, up to the sky above. There is a Latin maxim that I won't bore you with. And with leasehold, you're buying that property for a term of years as stated in the lease. So if it's a new lease, then it will be in your name. If not, you're buying a lease that'll be in somebody else's name with the residue of the term left, so whatever's left. That's the main difference. But with a leasehold, what you have to remember is that somebody will own that freehold. So somebody will own the property to the centre of the earth and to the sky above. You often get leaseholds, easier way of understanding it, if you like, is in a flat situation. So if you have a first floor flat, you can't really own that as a freehold because you can't own to the centre of the earth below because there might be somebody living underneath you. So in that respect, leaseholds are usually apartments and flats. In fact, you can't have a leasehold house anymore unless it's shared ownership, which is a different beast altogether.
And does a leasehold, the length of the lease, that can vary as well, can't it? And what impact, if the lease is got a relatively short time left, what the impact is that on the actual acquisition or purchase of the property?
Yep, so I mean, I've seen leases go up to 999 years. I've seen leases for 99 years. But as you say, the problem comes when you're buying the rest of a lease. So if you've got a 99-year lease, an original 99-year lease that's from the 80s, 40 years of that's already gone, you're only buying a 50-odd-year lease. That's caused problems historically in terms of finance, getting mortgage. It's not always worth as much as a longer lease. A longer lease is always more valuable. You can get that lease extended either by agreement with the freeholder, or there is also a statutory process for that as well. Depending on which avenue you take, you can extend the lease that way. Historically, there was always what we call a marriage value attached to that. So the shorter your lease is, the less term there is left on your lease, the more it costs to extend that lease. The recent legislation has supposedly done away with that marriage value, but we're kind of still waiting for a lot of that secondary legislation to come in to see how that looks on the ground, so to speak. The law is a slow-moving beast.
So if you're a seller and you know you're in a leasehold with a very short lease, which has only got 50 years left, potentially there's an impact on the actual property's value, I would imagine, because you're limited to who potentially could buy that property. So what would you advise a seller to do then to look at extending that lease if that's possible?
So there are two ways they could extend the lease, either through agreement with the freeholder, or they could opt for the statutory route under the Leasehold Reform Act, which gives them a legal entitlement to extend that lease. Either way, the result is the same. They would have a longer lease. Sometimes people choose to sell the lease whereby they extend the lease on completion as well, so they could still put the property up for sale at the same time as making those inquiries of the freeholder. And then what they would use some of the proceeds of sale to pay for that lease extension. So the buyer gets the long lease that they would want, that gives the value to the property and keeps their mortgage lender happy, and they get to sell the property to a wider market and get a better price for it. A reason that leasehold transactions can take longer than freehold transactions is that you're dealing with a whole extra party. So what people need to understand is that we now have a management company, sometimes a management company and a freeholder to deal with. So we have to request a lot more information if you're acting for the buyer. in terms of a management pack that would give you accounts, that would give you information regarding expenditure, management of the building as a whole. And if you're acting for the purchaser, waiting for that information, sometimes the quality of that information means that it's missing things that you then have to ask for, which then the seller's conveyancer has to go to the management company or freeholder. So it's a whole extra party in a transaction. So that's the reason that leasehold transactions take longer than a freehold.
It's a really valid point, actually, because again, national statistics show that leasehold transactions, that average from sale agreed to exchange of contracts, is actually extended by at least 5 weeks to 22 weeks. So if you're thinking about, I want to buy a leasehold and now, and I want to be in by Christmas, well, Christmas is only 16 weeks away, so it's a bit of a challenge. So again, how does the seller or the buyer, who can influence that?
It's very difficult. The conveyancer can do what they can in terms of chasing management companies and chasing freeholders for information that's outstanding, and if you're acting for the seller, but really we're to a certain extent beholden to them. So we work on their timelines, and as with lenders, these are the big boys, and we just have to try and keep those communication.
Does it come back to when the house or the apartment or flat is actually listed then by the seller, if they are they have all of their documentation in place and they understand who the management company is, having that information at the very beginning of the process surely is going to make a positive impact on the transaction time?
Absolutely. So at Chapter Law, we try and get a management pack from the management company or freeholder on a sale transaction, leasehold sale transaction, absolutely as soon as we can and as early as we can. We do not wait to be asked for that by the buyer, because they are inevitably going to ask for it at some point, and to wait until we ask can only cause delays. So if we get that pack as soon as we can, then all the better. If the sellers get that pack as soon as they can, often they have portals and apps on their phone that they can sometimes request this information quicker than we can, then they should be doing that as soon as they list the property, really.